Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're here from HelpShift and Backtrace to talk about automated game error reporting and in-app player support done right. My name is Greg Posner. I'm a HelpShift Senior Partner Engineer, and I'm joined today by Vincent Lussenberg.
Hello, I'm Vincent Lessenberg. I'm a technical product manager at Backtrace, and in that capacity, I do a lot of with Unity games and Unreal games and improving the error reporting for our customers.
Great. Thanks, Vincent. And we're excited to talk to you today because we believe this partnership between HelpShift and Backtrace will really help provide the next generation of support for both your end users as well as your support team and your engineering team. And what we're looking to do between the two of us is provide full visibility for your customer support team. That includes improving self-service and provide agents with key data. We want to make sure that when your end users reach out to you, we can provide that important pieces of information, things such as your phone version, your OS version, and get all that data automatically provided to your agents and your engineers when they need to escalate any types of information. We want to provide automated bug tracking. Imagine having a gameplay issue that gets opened automatically and it automatically opens something in Jira or whatever bug tracking software you're using. This will help understand when whales, someone who spends a lot of money in app, are reporting issues. And it helps your engineers decide, hey, how do we prioritize which bugs we need to fix? Which bugs are affecting our key users, and what type of trends do we see happening from within our database? We also allow your users to skip frontline agents. So imagine having an influencer or a VIP, someone who is very important in your platform that reaches out to you and they need immediate support. Do you want them to sit in line, especially if you're using email, which we see anytime from 12 to 24 hours in response time, to have to wait? What we want to do is make sure that when key influencers or VIPs reach out, they go directly to agents. They'll skip the bots, or if there's an engineering problem, it will automatically open up that ticket for your engineering team and say, hey, this is a priority ticket because this user is having this issue. And we're getting the developers the data they need. So no more back and forth between your engineers and your customer support team on asking your customer to get this piece of data or this piece of data. What we're able to do is provide all that information that developer needs up front to allow them to quickly and efficiently do their job and report on any issues that there might be. So first off, we want to talk about who is HelpShift. So HelpShift is an omni-channel customer service platform that was built for the unique needs of the mobile era. What we do is we provide that first-class in-app experience for a lot of the top games and apps that you use today. And since we started mobile, we're modernized help, meaning our SDK is enabled to allow users to quickly and efficiently stay in app and work on the support issues that they have. We work with a lot of the top gaming and app customers, as I said, so we're currently installed in over 3 billion devices worldwide just because of those apps that people are
Mm.
using. And we provide asynchronous chat, meaning that if you start a conversation and maybe you have to go to the daycare and pick up your kid or you got to pick up dinner, what you can do is you can leave that conversation and come back on your own time and pick it up where you left off. No more having to wait in line, no more saying, hey, you're 50th, please wait. You can have conversation on your terms when you're available. We like to automate satisfaction. So instead of building one giant bot, we like to create these micro bots, these quick hitters that allow you to say, hey, if you need to do this, reset password, it's a 3-step bot. These bots can speak in over 180 different languages, making sure that no matter where your customers or your gamers are worldwide, we have a solution for them. And we have a visual bot builder, meaning that anyone from your customer service agents to your product managers to your engineers have the ability to come in and build bots without any PhD. And
Huh.
finally, we want to
So
give.
if you
Go ahead, Vince.
just wanted to ask you something, like the bot speaking 180 languages, does that mean like when you do like a bot builder that it gives this similar like logic reply to like a Japanese player as an English player as a Spanish player? So, or do I need to know all of these languages myself in order to set up the bot right?
So we have tools that will help do the translation services automatically. We do recommend at times that people go in and QA check them because sometimes certain languages don't translate one to one. So we do
Mm-hmm.
have tools that will help with that. but we want to make sure that we do get a little hands-on, because you also want to make sure that if you're speaking to a German user compared to an English user compared to a Chinese user, your wording might want to be a little different depending on how you work with those individuals. So that's a
That
good
makes sense.
question. And finally, we give these agents superpowers. So we have AI and intent classification tools internally to make sure that when a user comes in and types in a specific question, no matter how they ask it, we provide them to the right answer. So for a user that forgot their password, if they come in and say, "What's my password?" or "I can't log in," or "How do I do this?" we can make sure that we route them to the appropriate workflows that allows them to efficiently and effectively get their job done. And we can provide those agents with those cues, allowing them for when influencers or VIP users or maybe just advanced issues come in, that we have the right agents working on those cases, allowing them to help the individual that's been reaching out to you. Now a little bit about Backtrace.
Cool. Yeah. Let me step in there. So Backtrace is really an error and exception management platform. So our focus is to help developers reduce the time to detection and resolution. So do that stuff as automated as possible, and like being able to fix it right away. But collecting all of that information as well. So making sure that there's a lot of depth in the stuff that we capture. So if I go through this slide, on the left-hand side, we see cross-platform error capture. So that's really one of the things that we've focused on a lot throughout the years. So think of whenever, especially in the mobile space, right, or in the gaming space. Yes, you have your games on mobile, but they might be running on PlayStation as well, on Xbox. You have your PC gamers. You have maybe a few macOS players left and right. We make sure that all of these platforms we can capture crashes. So these are like, fatal interruptions in a gamer's experience, but also like more software exceptions that could lead to problems. Make sure that we capture that from basically all these different sources. And out of the box, what we focus on is actually to not rely on player reports and interaction. So Greg was mentioning that before. Classic way of interacting with users when there's problems is like to actually interact with them, allow them to talk to a bot. So we take the approach is that we collect everything on the back end. So we don't really have an interaction with the player necessarily. It's just like a background worker that captures all of that information. But that does lead to a wealth of information that you could expose the moment that you do have an interaction with that player, which is, of course, what this webinar is all about. So all the contextual information your developers need. So in this case, the developers of your game, so that when I need to interact with a player, for example, someone has left a 1-star review on the App Store, which actually drives the adoption of games quite a bit. So a lot of game studios do pay attention on their ratings on App Stores. So in these situations, I don't have to go through the hassle of like trying to contact that player and stuff like that. I have that information already captured. I won't know what device they're on. Know a lot of information that they probably don't. With the ability to scrub that as well from GDPR points of view, so that you don't keep information that you shouldn't have there about the player. But the technical stuff. So once we have all that data, what you want to do is group and deduplicate that. And that's basically any error or exception reporting solution out there will do that for you. We've pretty advanced deduplication algorithm that you can influence as well. And the cool thing is that they work across platform as well. So in situations, if you have a certain problem on Android, and the same problem on iOS, you will be able to see that deduplicated and basically in one category, in one group. We make sure that we remove the noise there, and that has something to do with analyzing the data in a certain way, and make sure that you're seeing the most important signals, and that's a combination of presenting it in a certain way for you, as well as making sure that you have the ability to filter in various ways for things that that are important for your game. We have integrations into your workflow tools, so think of tracking, notification, messaging, and dashboarding tools. So that's quite important. That it's great that you have Backtrace, a repository of all that information that is out there. But if it's just an island and someone needs to know that it's there and remember to check it, like the efficacy is going to go down pretty quickly. So that's why we put a lot of effort in making sure that we can integrate easily with third-party solutions, and in this case, Helpshift as well. So make it easy to pull that information, all that analytics that we're doing, pull that out of Backtrace and display that in various different places. And one of these examples we're going to see during the demo. Real-time analysis is also very, very important, and this comes down to our scalability as well. So we do this for, like the example that I like to give is we have a AAA game studio customer that had a launch recently and captured 200 million error reports in a time span of 48 hours. And you can imagine that that's coming from all over the world. Can be like pretty like spiky data because the moment that a game is launched, you start playing it right away. But that's the type of scale that we're able to handle, not only the bandwidth, but as well as like making sure that the analysis is being done in real time, so that you're not lagging behind, so that you can immediately answer your questions there. We see there as well, zoom out for an overview of error frequency, prioritization, and trends is one of the most important things. Like it's great that you have data, but you want it to drive decisions for you. So we allow you to, look at it from a 30,000 foot point of view, and as well zoom into the individual device. What is really important is that you can group and filter on system and custom attributes. An example there is a game studio that we work with has a racing game, and they kind of want to see the errors that are happening when players are, driving a specific type of race car. So those things you can do with Backtrace, order these different exception reports in that way, and that can be your own custom attributes, like your custom race car is a good example of that. And that presents a lot of opportunities. What Greg is going to talk about as well is getting that information in the hands of someone that is trying to resolve a problem directly with a user, such as Helpshift does, as well as bots. So yeah, Greg.
So Vincent, when you're talking to your customers and your prospects and they're talking about the potential launch of a new app or new game, from
Right.
the software development lifecycle, when do you typically recommend having a tool like Backtrace to capture these issues that may crop up? Is it usually during maybe the beta stage, during the growth stage, during the kind of maturity stage? What makes the most sense for companies?
So what we tend to recommend is to start using it as early as development, but generally you see a big up spike in playtesting. The reason that you already want to start capturing errors in playtesting is that the moment that you like launch for beta, so playtesting being like really friends and family, right? But if you launch for beta, like out there in the wild, that you already have some wealth of data that you can compare your results with. So in other words, maybe when you are releasing your game for beta, you're seeing an uptick of certain types of problems that might be related to certain devices that in your playtest, in your friends and family test, you only had like 1 or 2 people that had that device. The advantage is that you can correlate it with what happened during playtesting. So anything that you see in large scale in production, you can see, okay, did I see that in playtesting as well? Generally in playtesting, you have a little bit more insight in what the player was doing. You generally know who the person is, so you can deduce things from that. But the vast majority of the value that Backtrace gives is really when your game's running in production, because that's typically the situation where your game is installed on a million different devices that behave like slightly differently. It's hard to get all that data collected, so that's typically where we see our customers having most of the value.
I guess data tends to get magnified when it's at scale, so you see a lot
Yeah.
more.
Especially when there's clients involved, yeah. If it's just a server-side application, that's like you can control that pretty well. But the moment that you have to deploy something on clients, that gets hairy.
And I think this continues telling our story really well when you start to dive into it. What we're looking at right now is something that we run at Helpshift. It's called our Smart Intent tool. And what it does is we take a look at raw data that's being submitted to our customers, the ones that want to share. And what we do is we run it to analyze what type of issues that we're seeing our customers face. And this one was actually ran for a couple gaming companies. And what they wanted to do is get an understanding of what type of issues are my customers reaching out to me about? How can I start automating and finding out what's going on with my games? So what we did is we took about 100,000 raw issues that these they've seen, and we grouped it into tier one and tier two type categories. So you'll see a tier one category is rewards, and then those subcategories, which are tier two, are missing or didn't receive or reward issues. And what this helps us to do is to narrow down what type of issues are you're seeing and what can we automate and what can't we automate. And what we see here is that the biggest grouping of issues we have are gameplay issues, which is a great way for us to identify the type of issues they're having, right? They could be arena battle gameplay bugs, freezing connection issues. But the problem is that, well, we know what the issues are, it's hard to start troubleshooting this. It becomes this pit of what can be causing these gameplay issues. And that's where it takes a customer service agent the skills to start troubleshooting what can be done and then escalating that to the engineering team. And what happens is that there's this whole back and forth conversation. Again, what OS are you running? What type of phone is it? Is it up to date? And because of these back and forth, and depending on the channel that you're talking on, whether it be email or whether it be phone or whether it even be chat, it can potentially increase the average handle time, which makes a poor experience for both your end user, your gamer, but also your team. No one wants to go back and forth for days trying to troubleshoot something, and your engineering team just wants the data that's important to them so they can start to troubleshoot what can go wrong. And I think this is the beauty of the Backtrace Help Shift solution is that we allow the front end for your customers to reach out to you and say there's an issue, and using the logs, and we'll see this as the demo goes on, but using the logs from Backtrace, when someone reports a connection issue or a freezing issue, we can look directly into the data to get a better understanding of what type of issue this user is having, and making sure that gets escalated to the right person. Maybe it's just a customer service agent that says, hey, you need to reboot your phone, or maybe it's an engineer saying, hey, there's a problem with this build of the game on the latest version of Android, and we need to do something about it. So what Backtrace is allowing our customers to do is really take a glimpse into this pit of issues and start actually troubleshooting what can be the cause of these issues.
Right. Yeah, and that is actually because in Backtrace we don't really talk to the players directly. This is a common question that we actually get from the game studios that we work with, because generally, if there's a bug, it requires updating the app. You don't really have a control of like players upgrading. The moment that you have a channel that you can actually more easily push a notification to a whole set of users, telling them something about, hey, you should really be updating, but not like really hard force them to update. That's really something that they're looking for.
So just to kind of double down on this, let's talk about what today's experience for your users are. And we've looked at a couple of the biggest name gaming and apps that are out there today and tried to troubleshoot what can we do if we see a crashing issue from within our game. And we see a lot of forums that come up with no direct workflow solutions, as well as just a way to submit a request via email, which takes, again, typical SLA we see is 12 to 24 hours to respond to an email. So today, if I had a crashing issue, I have to, as a user, open up a support ticket, whether this be chat or email. The customer service agent gets that ticket, and then they need to get some more details back from the user. So maybe you ask me my phone type, the OS I'm running, maybe you ask me what service or what network I'm running on. So I find those answers and I send them back to the agent. And again, if we're talking about email, think about how many hours might go in between each one of these steps here. So we're talking anywhere from 4 to 8 to 12 hours between each one of these. So the agent enters in the details that I've sent to them, and then the agent opens them up in Jira so the engineer can start to look at it. So then the engineer takes a look at the ticket and says, hey, we need more details here. Maybe we need to find out what specific version of Android are they running, or maybe some more details that are important about the SDK version or the game version. So the customer service agent has to reach back out to the customer. The user finds the answer, and I can keep on going here. It's a painful cycle where no one really enjoys what's happening here. As the end user, you just want your problem fixed. As the agent, you're just that middleman that's trying to coordinate between the engineer and the gamer. And as the engineer, you just need the specific data points that are important for you to get your job done, to understand how to troubleshoot that issue. So it's a very convoluted, long, drawn out experience where there's really no winners at the end of the day. Everyone just kind of feels exhausted from having to go through this.
Yeah, and I could just relate to that as a user. You never really want to actually go to that support button because generally it doesn't really resolve your problems to begin with. You have to explain copious amounts of context you've already given before. So yeah, I think we can do better than that.
And I'm sure, Vincent, you as a technical person, also when you reach out to customer service, is just as aggravating because they're going to tell you, hey, can you uninstall and reinstall it? And yes, I know all these troubleshooting steps. I've done all these
Right.
troubleshooting steps. There's a bigger issue here. And they said, no, just do a quick reboot and see if that fixes it. Like,
Yep. And
whether
then you
you're
lie that you just did a reboot, but you didn't. Yep.
whether you're a beginner or an expert, everyone's going to get frustrated because the engineer just needs the data that's important to them.
Right.
So that's why with Backtrace and HelpShift, we want to combine that user and development experience and put it in the forefront so that when a user has that issue, it gets all the information that's needed and send it directly to the developer. So what you're looking at on this little moving image, this GIF here, is the ability to type in a question that you have, and it's going to direct you directly to the workflow that's most important to you. So whether it be gameplay issues, whether it be a password reset, we're going to do is route you to either a bot or an agent that's set up in a predetermined workflow to collect the data points that are important for the engineer or the customer service agent to work with to help provide everyone with the details that are needed. We don't want to have to put the onus on your end users to find out what version phone they have, what version of iOS or Android they're running. All this data already exists within your app. So why not just collect it and package it up and provide it to the place that it needs to go to allow for quick and easy troubleshooting? This improves the customer satisfaction level because the customer service, the end user doesn't really need to provide any additional data other than they had a crash. It improves the handle time because we don't have to have any of that back and forth between the end user, the agent, and the engineer. It just provides a better experience for everyone that's involved because the agent is pretty much skipped over because all that data is being sent directly to the developer. The developer doesn't need to go back to the engineer because, or sorry, the engineer doesn't need to go back to the customer service rep because all the information's there already. And the end user doesn't need to do anything because all the data is there. So it's a much better and improved experience for all parties that are involved. So with that, what we're going to do is we're about to jump into the demo. I want to do a quick kind of high level overview of what we're going to take a look at. I'm not going to ruin it all, so Vincent has some surprises up his sleeve. But the first user is going to have an issue on their phone, and they're going to try and report it, and we're going to see how that workflow is created and how it's going to interact with both the bot and the engineer. Another user is going to have an experience, but this time instead of being a instead of being a mobile-based user, this is going to be a web-based user. They're going to go through a slightly different workflow, but the same steps to get different steps to get the same type of experience to provide the engineer with all the details that they need. And finally, when all those issues are resolved, how do we let people know in bulk that this issue is resolved? So with that, I'm going to hand the screen over to Vincent, who's going to go through these demos here.
Absolutely. So I'm pulling up my phone, and that should be showing up for you guys. And cool. So we see an awesome little space shooter. So it's a Unity game that has both the Backtrace and the HelpShift SDK integrated there. And as you can see, I'm happily playing until like right now. I hit some kind of problem. My game doesn't do anything anymore. It's frozen basically, effectively. Once the game, and this is powered by the SDK and Backtrace, decided, hey, I received like a certain type of error. It basically shows us that help shift button that I just clicked, and that creates a dialogue with the gaming demo support, where you see that automatically, based on the type of problem that I had, the initial message was already sent to HelpShift. So that's actually a big advantage. As a player, I don't really have to start saying, oh, this was my problem, because it was kind of obvious from the context. The only thing is what we see here. It looks like I may have experienced a gameplay issue. Can you please confirm? That's what you want, because all I really need to do is respond. Yeah, that's actually the reason that I clicked that button. So less work for me right now. Then it asks me to provide some context. In this case, I don't really have a ton of context. I was just playing, so I can send that to that endpoint. And right now, do I have other feedback? It asks me. Nope. And right now, the various algorithms on the HelpShift side are firing basically. So there is an integration between HelpShift and Backtrace, where HelpShift can hit up the APIs of Backtrace and basically find out, hey, have we seen this issue before? Do we have players that have this problem? And in this case, it is a new issue. So that's basically communicated to me as a user. And also that there will be a follow-up once the issue is resolved. So I kind of now have done what I needed to do. Backtrace already captured all of the details of this specific problem, this hang that occurred. So in this situation, let's switch to player 2. So I have another example here. So it's basically...
Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I think what's really cool about this experience is based on the feedback that Backtrace tells us on what type of error it is, these workflows can be set up to be different. So if the engineer needs a specific data point for a memory leak, we can make sure that the bot collects the appropriate information from the end user on what they were doing during a memory leak. If it was maybe a connection issue, we can send them down a different workflow. So based on the logs that Backtrace is sending HelpShift, we can reroute that conversation, that workflow for that user to be something more appropriate.
In the meantime, I was playing like basically the same game on the background, and what we saw is that the game hung just now, and that basically the same experience happened there. So I got that HelpShift button in the top right, and that popped up basically a conversation, so it looks slightly different. And here I can use some of the intents that Greg was talking about. So in this case, you see that there's not a message in this example, that a message didn't go out automatically what the exact problem is. But I can type something like this, like hang, or I can say like crash, and I see that the problems that, or the menu options that I have changed based on that. So in this case, I'm just like, this is close enough. I have a gameplay issue that's being communicated. So then I go into basically the same dialogue, just a different platform, confirming that I have that problem. The bot's probably going to come back to me asking if I have some details that I can share. As you can see, the bot is responding, so I can say again that I was just playing. And nope, no other feedback to give. And what I see now is more of the information that indicates that the engineering team is aware of the problem that is going on and will follow up once the issue is resolved, similar to the situation that I'm seeing right here on my phone. So this is a good moment to take a look at what Greg is seeing on the HelpShift side and what can be done to resolve this issue and to push that notification to these two players so that they can continue their game.
Great. Thanks. And now we're taking a look at what an agent in HelpShift is taking a look at as these conversations are coming in and how they can work with data to make more sense of it. So what we see in my screen is on my left-hand side, again, this is the agent experience from HelpShift, is all the different queues I have set up. I have a few different ones set up, one called All Issues, Open Issues, Awaiting Agent, and Open Jira Issues. You'll also see in this middle column here all the different types of issues that have come in recently. So I'll see, for example, this one here. This little icon here means it's web chat that it came in. That's because it came in from the website, from the WebGL game that Vincent was using. What language is it in? And I also have associated Jira tickets based on the type of issue that the user's having. It's just associating it to a tag with the Jira ticket. You'll see the one below it here, for example, is our phone. Same type of issue. I can see the entire conversation that the user had with the bot, so it makes more sense to me. And then I also have the idea of custom issues. So who is this user to me, to my game? What level were they on? What segment are they important? What was their player ID? How much money have they spent in app? So you can start to take a look at different tags such as Jira 34 here and do some reporting saying, hey, what was the lifetime spend of the total people that have had the issue with Jira 34? And you can really start to build robust reports, getting a better understanding of that. I could also come into my web, this version that Vincent had from the web. And as an agent, you'll see that we link that, and this yellow box here specifically is just an internal comment. So now the agent who's looking at this ticket can see that this is the Jira bug that has been opened because of this ticket or assigned because of this ticket. And this is another number of users that has this issue as well. So you can start to really measure and gauge the scale that this issue is affecting your user base. And when your engineering team is looking at this, you can start to prioritize based off of facts like this or that lifetime spend to see how it works. So there's a lot of cool data you can get from within the HelpShift system that we're pulling from the Backtrace platform. And what Vincent's going to show you is how there's other data points that we can also, if exciting or something you want to use, that you can start to pull into the platform as well. But before I send it back to Vincent, what I want to do is when this issue is replied or resolved, I can set a rule to automatically respond to all my users, letting them know that the issue is resolved. Just so you can see the steps, I'm going to show it manually right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click both my issues. I'm going to click edit. I'm going to do is mark as resolved, and then I'm also going to send a note to my customer saying sorry for the issue. Everything is resolved. Oops.
Yay!
Now, and we'll send that. And with that, I'll send it back to Vincent, who will show you those next steps and how the platform looks in Backtrace.
Absolutely. So you already saw it coming in on the mobile device. So I got indeed that message. It even says Greg Posner, and that the issue is resolved. So I can then further interact. I can rate my chat experience, and the same that we see that popping up on basically the web UI as well. Same situation basically. Same message. I can interact with that and leave feedback. So in that case, I immediately know that this problem has been resolved. A couple of things I wanted to add as well is like we showed you that we included the number of affected users, which of course is cool. And that's just an example of something that you can include there. There's much more information in the Backtrace database, obviously. For example, like the amount of devices that are affected, like users, we've seen that, much more information, and we're going to explore that as well in the Backtrace system. So basically anything that I'm going to show you, these are different things that could be exposed to HelpShift as well. So if that makes sense for your bot workflow, this kind of information is can be pulled in as well. So let me refresh my screen here. As you see, it's focused on like my device. So one of the two problems that had the devices for the last day. So you see that I have a total of 14 sessions. So there was some prep for that webinar where I started up the game a couple of times. So that's reported to Backtrace, and we see that we've received two errors. So in this case, we can see that for this one user, me, 14% of the sessions were ridden by this specific problem. This becomes a lot more interesting if I actually zoom out a little bit. So I take a look at the last 7 days, and it becomes even more interesting if I don't just look at myself. So what we see here is that we get a great overview of all the different problems that have been happening. So instead of just a handful of problems that I have, we see that we actually have 11,000 errors. And these are not just crashes. It can be like hangs, as we just encountered. It can be memory problems as well in case of mobile. It can be like sort of custom reports where it's just like more of a message that's shared, and much more. You see these various records here. You see that there's some deduplication at work. So instead of these 3,300 errors just all being shown in this huge list, what the Backtrace algorithm already established is that these have a similar, sufficiently similar root cause that it's grouped together in what we call a fingerprint that identifies a group of problems. What I can see then as well is how many of my sessions, so application launches, were affected by that specific error happening. So you can see it by application session. You can see it by user as well. So for example, we see 120 unique users that are affected by that. And depending on the configuration that you have, you can see the same blue percentage behind there as well. So if it were enabled on this environment, I could see as well how much, I see 120 people, but how many people actually were playing my game over these last 7 days in total, and what percentage is that. Finally, What I want to show here on this screen is the fact that it's linked to Jira. We obviously already saw that because that's information that was passed on to HelpShift. And that's what Greg showed. And this is a bi-directional synchronization. So because HelpShift integrates with Jira and Backtrace integrates with Jira, that's just basically a workflow tool that we can both get information from. So the moment like we see that this is in progress, that means that it's in progress in Jira as well. The moment that I interact with that, it would be resolved in Jira as well. And what Greg showed is that basically the change in the system was triggered by the fact that a ticket was resolved in Jira. So in other words, I can resolve this ticket the moment that I know that I've done that. I can do that in Backtrace, I can do that in HelpShift, I can do it in Jira, and that information just gets synchronized and automatically pushed to the users if you have a bot set up that can do that. Or in this example, Greg did it manually. A couple of things I want to touch on as well is it's great to see these buckets of pre-sorted exceptions, but what's really important as well is the fact that you can group it in many different ways. So especially this is true for application development or app development in general, but it is very much true for mobile games as well, is that there are just going to be many different versions out there. Not everyone upgrades at the same time. Some people have auto update enabled, some people don't. So what I can very easily see is, hey, what are my most problematic versions? And it's not really a surprise, but the version that we've used for this webinar tends to have a lot of problems. So we see a lot of problems here. 92% of my application launches seem to be affected by this problem. But for the more real world data, we see that for that version 2.10, that it's still like a lot higher than for the other versions. So long story short, you can see here, what are the versions that I need to focus on? Maybe my focus shouldn't be fixing bugs and assigning that to developers. Maybe in this case, my call to action is to get these users to upgrade. If I want to pull in information about what kind of devices these problems are happening on, I can do that as well. So distribution can show me, in this case, it's obvious that the majority was on iPhone. But in this, for all these other versions, we see it across the different versions. So there's not like one specific device that seems to be the problem. But I can keep digging into this information and to, for example, explore, hey, what was the level that the user was playing? And suddenly I see that, for example, for this version, 90% of the players were on this house select screen. This is information that is easily queryable in Backtrace. So that's something that you could even pull into HelpShift as well. So for example, as the error gets reported by Backtrace to HelpShift, the information on which level the player is playing can be included. Because then you can pull in information about, okay, what other users are seeing problems on that level. That's another thing that you can expose. And you don't have to ask the player about that. That's information that's automatically collected, both on these error conditions as well as interactions with HelpShift.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of great stuff, and I hope we were able to build a vision on that next step on how the customer experience and customer journey can include customer service reps, engineers, and help automate a lot of these different processes. Just to reiterate one more time what we took a look at today. The first workflow we saw was a user that was on their phone. It doesn't need to be a phone. They actually say there's 11 different screen or connected devices that users use these days. So whether it be phone, a computer, a console, an Apple TV, any device that your customers are using your app, we can integrate. And when that user had an issue, what he did was they reached out, and we saw it in the backtrace data logs that there was an error. So we checked Jira to see if that error existed yet. It didn't. So we created a new issue in there, and we let the customer know that this is a new issue, and we provided that information. The second workflow we saw was a user that came in on the web. The user had the same issue, but they went through a different workflow to open up a ticket. This was just by design, so you can see the different workflows that existed. We checked it once again, the backtrace data logs, but this time we saw that there's already a Jira ticket associated to that error already. So we let the customer know that this is the in progress issue right now, and we'll let them know when it was resolved. And then finally, what we did is we took a look at all the users that had that specific issue, and what we were able to do was send a blast message to all those users once it was done, letting them know it's now resolved, and if there's any other issues, so please let us know. So On behalf of myself and Vincent, we really appreciate you joining us today. We're really excited about this partnership and how it can help really expedite and improve your customer satisfaction and any bug or issue handling that you're working on. I think if there's any further questions, we're now going to open this for questions and next step.
Sure, I can speak to that for sure. So when you're just talking about game logs and like analytics and stuff like that, the context and the breadth of what you can collect is pretty limited, and it depends as well as if your game is still like operating. The moment that you have a native crash or you have a memory problem where everything slows down or a hang or something like that, typically getting information through logs is really hard to do. It's just like one of the tools in your tool belt to have a rich logging ecosystem. But what we're able to do as well is, in case of a native crash, collect the entire state of the process, collect memory information, and display that in a very comprehensible way. You would have to do that through logging. You would have to decide, am I logging memory information like every minute or something like that, where at crash time, when you actually have a problem, it's like really captured at the moment, at that exact moment. Another typical one that is kind of hard to do with logging is attachments. So think of a screenshot that you want to take at the moment that a user is experiencing a specific problem. That is another great example of something that's hard to do with logging. In addition, I would like to add that logging information is added to the context of your crash as well. So there's functionality called breadcrumbs that showcases the state of what your device is doing. For example, orientation changed, or there's a memory problem, or app went to the background or something like that. We augment that as well with any of the logging that you're doing as part of your game. So it's really just like part of the way to deduce what that user was really experiencing. But if it's your only tool, it's really hard to make it scale. So I hope that was helpful. What
I
else do
love
we got, Greg?
I love the breadcrumbs concept. I think understanding the steps that someone took to actually get into a game. I think of, even when I'm playing a game and all of a sudden I crash, I get so angry I don't even remember what was happening. So having something built into the logs, I think, makes a ton of sense.
Yep.
So the second question, and I think this kind of goes to your breadcrumbs, is does Backtrace capture the state of the game at the time of the crash?
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. So there's a couple of parts of that. It depends a little bit on the type of game, right? Like sometimes the full state of a game, if it's a fairly like simple free-to-play game, can be captured in like sort of a state file. Some of the game companies that we work with do that, so that the moment that the crash occurs, the developer is just able to download that, for example, JSON file with the game state into the local environment. You see exactly where that player was when that problem occurred. But that very much, of course, depends on the type of game that you're playing. So that is up to the individual game, although you can really easily attach it. What Backtrace does for you is capture, the breadcrumbs that we already spoke of, like just like sort of a more technical state of your process. So the moment that you have a crash, you have all the threads that were active, information on what the threads were doing. In some situations, you even have insight into local variables, like memory information and stuff like that. So claiming full state is really a hard thing to claim because it's always like a partial view. But it's a pretty complete view to allow you to do a lot of debugging without having to go back to the customer and collect more information. And that is really the key, not really requiring that additional, hey, can you do this or can you do that for us again? That's what we focus on. So I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, preventing that frustration to the end user, right? Just don't even involve them if they don't need to be involved. Just collect those logs and keep doing what you're doing. And this next question, I
Yep.
think, is one that kind of hits home for me, and I think I'll leave it to Vincent because he's by far the more technical one of the two of us here. It's, these require two different SDKs to be installed when using Unity or installing it into your game or app. How difficult is it to install the two different SDKs?
Well, I'm a sales engineer and product manager for Backtrace. So of course, I'm going to tell you it's really easy, but I also want to back that up with some information. So partially, and I'll pull up like the call to actions in a little bit, but that's the reason that both Helpshift and Backtrace have 30-day trials, so you can integrate it and see how easy or how hard it is. So for both of the SDKs, it's actually a pretty easy process to import it. We've shown you things in context with the Unity game engine that a lot of like game developers use, but that could be true for like Crytek engine as well, or or CryEngine, I'm sorry, or Unreal or something like that. And it tends to be pretty straightforward. So in context for this webinar, we have the source code that we can share for that. And it's in both situations, just like kind of like 3 lines of source code. Of course, got to put in the right lines there, but it's not like sort of like a day to integrate everything. It's just like importing a package, setting up a couple of unique URLs, and that's like kind of what we're dealing with. Do you have anything to add there, Greg, from the Helpshift perspective?
From the Helpshift perspective, the SDK is very straightforward to install. We have some documentation that goes through step by step. I think what's nice is the engineer needs to just enter information about the SDK, and then most of the configuration is actually done via our web GUI. So if you want to customize bots or workflows or anything like that, that's all done during on the web interface. So it doesn't require an engineer or developer. It's very simple to get everything set up. And I think from the SDK perspective, it probably takes maybe an hour, if that, to install the Unity SDK. It's very simple, and there's videos on the site that help you walk through that as well. I think we maybe have one more time for one more question, Vincent, and then maybe we could talk to our next call to action. I think this is one we can both take. It's, can I pass custom information about my users to both Helpshift and Backtrace? Maybe I'll start off from the Helpshift perspective, and then we can talk to the Backtrace perspective. From Helpshift, there's 2 different ways we can pull data or pass custom information to your agents. So that would be via either our API, which we have a native REST API that can be used to pull or push data wherever you want. But you have to remember we're also an SDK in the game itself. So when your engineer is setting these workflows up, or these when they're setting up the SDK, you can choose to pass specific pieces of information through to your agents. So if it's, whether it be language, time zone, how much money they've spent in app, how many tickets they've opened, all this stuff can be passed to us via the SDK, and we can also be sharing that information with Backtrace with our API configuration.
Cool.
Do you want to speak to that for the Backtrace side?
Just wanted indeed to pull up our next steps. So I can speak to the Backtrace side a little bit. It's very comparable to what Greg said. From our perspective, it's mainly part of the game SDKs that we provide. There tends to be very clear interface to add any custom information that you want. So anything that's relevant for your specific game. So it's a straightforward process, and in the follow-up of this webinar, make sure to include links to that. And again, this is something that within a trial you could easily explore. How do you do the standard stuff, like the checkbox items, like attach a screenshot? But how do I do more complicated things, such as attaching my game state or my custom attributes or anything like that? Yeah.
Great. And for our next steps, we are excited to show you what this all looks like, but I think actually using it and testing it is really believing how easy this is to set up and get going. So what we want to do is offer our customers of either Helpshift or Backtrace have assisted trials of each one of the services, so you can actually see how the partnership works together and how easy it makes it for your end users, and how you can take pressure off of your customer service agents by providing the information to your engineers directly from your gamers. So you'll all get a copy of this deck after the webinar. You can get started with a free trial. As Vincent said, it's a 30-day free trial. We'll be here to help if you need any help with it. But I really do think getting your hands on is really believing it and seeing how well this can work for you.
Absolutely, and we're really excited to work with you guys, especially in the combination of Helpshift and Backtrace to add both of that. And I think that's pretty much all we wanted to talk about, isn't it, Greg?
Yeah, I think on behalf of Helpshift and Backtrace, we want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to working with you and talking with you in the future.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a good day.